There's a new way to stay connected and know what's happening with Market to Market when you subscribe to Market Insider. One email and a lot of information awaits you. Go to markettomarket.org and subscribe to Market Insider. Welcome into another MTOM podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. Land prices. We always seem to get a jolt whenever we talk land prices, land values, land sales. Tom Shutter is always with us to talk about this. And Tom, do you always feel like it's a broken record whenever I ask? I mean, do I have the same 6 questions every time we talk?
No, Paul, I feel my responses sometimes are that way. And like we said before, the market's always changing. There's always something new to report and to talk about. So we're happy to do that.
Well, let's get to the new. What's new right now?
I'd say the new is obviously we're coming through probably one of the more high supply times of the year. That November, December timeframe, a lot of land changing hands. And I think we've seen the buyers really change too in the short term with a lot of farmer buyers in the past and maybe not so much in the future in the short term.
And before I forget, you're with Farmers National Company, regional guy based in North
Yep.
Iowa. I was just in Northeast Iowa over the weekend driving, and I saw a few for sale signs for, auction signs. I always pick up the newspaper and I kind of look this time of year and I see the logo of your company and many, many sales. Rate for me. You say November, this is a busy time. How busy is this compared to previous years?
Surprisingly, I'd say we're pretty steady from 24, but we're off from the years prior to that. 21 and 2 were probably some of the heaviest years that we're going to see for a while. And it's slowly been trending down. I would say we were more flat than down in 25. I just calculated real quick before we jumped on, we had about 27 sales, land auction sales in the last 30, 45 days. And so for us, that's heavy. Obviously we'd still like to do more, but it's been a busy month. So
2021, is that because there was cash in people's pockets? That
100%.
was the biggest thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Is there still cash in people's pockets?
There is. I would say the pockets are fewer. Those pockets are still, there's a lot of cash in those pockets, but then there's a wide gap in variance. And there's some folks on the other end of the spectrum that are really struggling right now with cash grain the way it is.
Do you think people have more cash in their pockets or more banknotes in their pockets who are coming to auction?
That are coming to the auction?
Yeah.
I'd still say cash. I would venture to say those folks with banknotes in their pockets maybe aren't as serious. Right now, maybe if things are tight, they're less likely to go and overextend themselves further and buy another piece of farm ground.
And do you attribute that they have the note, or that there's a higher interest rate than maybe the last time they came to buy on that note?
Partially, I would just say I would go back to the profitability of the acre. The prolonged grain prices are the number one factor. Yes, the interest rates play a role in that, but the fact that the cash flow just isn't there like it was is the primary driver right now. Yep.
I think before we've talked about the age of that buyer.
Yes.
Still north of 70?
I wouldn't say that. I'd say maybe in their 60s is probably your number one buyer. Maybe a family generational farm that's coming into existence where they're willing to extend for the next generation. I will say, as far as age goes, one thing that's different this year that I hadn't expected is the beginning farmer has all but been taken out in the last 30 days, and primarily because of the government shutdown. That was an unintended consequence that we saw in our business, and probably going on into the future here, unless you're really, really aggressive and there's that one piece of ground that you have to have. Those beginning farmers are sitting on the sidelines right now.
Because they were getting some type of government assistance and the like a first time buyer or a beginning farmer. Is that what you
Yes.
mean?
Yes, those beginning farmer loans is what allows those folks to compete with the larger cash buyer. And so once that government shut down, um, there was nobody to talk to. There was nobody to reaffirm, hey, are we still on for next Tuesday at the auction? There was none of that. And so those folks were pushed to the side. And we actually had some closings that were delayed because of that, where we had folks that were buying farms contingent on that beginning farmer loan coming through and then having to either delay closing or make other arrangements in the short term to make sure we get those farms closed.
You're talking maybe a sale that happened in mid-September, right before the shutdown, and is in the process that you always do before you close. That's what you mean?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just like buying a house. It takes time to get all the paperwork and everybody signed and loans cleared. Let's hit loans again just for a moment. On the interest rate, always a point of contention. The president always wants that lower. It's still not as high as it was in the high times.
Hmm.
What do you say we are? Are we in high interest rates right now? Higher interest rates, or just the normal that we're dealing with now?
Yeah, so this is my opinion. I'll step out back from Farmers National or any type of. I think this is probably pretty average when you look back 20 or 30 years. But in my short time frame in this business, I saw almost zero, right? So this seems very high for me. But when you take a step back at the larger picture, it's probably more normal from that standpoint. And we have a lot of folks that we've sold farms for that were very concerned on the opposite end, where they were trying to park this money into some asset, um, and wanting to get these farms sold as quickly as possible before the rates moved down again. And so we deal with it on both ends, right?
Mhm.
Um, but it
All right.
is what it is. So
Let's talk about that buyer. Who's buying? You say 60, but is it somebody expanding an operation, or is it somebody parking money as an investment?
both. So I would say those are our number one and number two buyers right now in the short term is your large, could be a family operation, could be sort of a corporate farming type deal, but they're your larger operators in the areas. And then probably runner up in that realm would be your investor buyers right now. When we've seen, interest rates the way they are or cash grain down, that's when your market tends to slide and those buys get a little bit more appetizing for the um, investment buyer.
Is it the dentist that's
It could
buying?
be, yes, it could be your local investor like that, or it could be some type of regional folks that aggregate money for farmland funds.
We both chuckle, but that's usually one of those signs, right? When the doctors and dentists are coming in, not necessarily the hedge fund person or the regular investor, but that's always, I got a hot tip. I'm going to
Yep.
go buy this land. I mean
Hmm.
that's true in your industry, right?
Oh, 100%. 100% it is. And 1031s, they're still out there too. 1031 buyers, those folks that have sold a piece of ground and needing to park those funds into another farm rather than paying the capital gains tax. They're on a timeline. They're on a window of opportunity there too. So those folks have been coming in, buying a few of those farms that would seemingly be under the market in this high supply time.
Who's selling right now?
So again, to kind of go back to our seller, our typical stereotype, it's the folks with legacy assets with some type of a life event in the background, where they're typically not trying to offload these assets, rather forced to in a lot of cases based on their current situation. Could be an estate, could be some type of death in the family. Um, it could be all sorts of things, but it's really based on their goals individually and not necessarily a broader um, market dynamic Now, you do have a smaller facet of the market that's focused on returns. And over time, they're going to gravitate towards those higher returning assets and getting out of farmland into some type of a stock or some other vehicle.
I think at one point you've told me over the years that there's different motivations. You mentioned the family. I think you said, is it an auction? Is it a listing? Is it something else? You don't always hear when it's just, hey, I'm selling it to this person down the road. It doesn't necessarily have to go through you, does it?
It does not. It does not.
So
Now,
do you know if those are happening more or
I
less?
do, yes. And a lot of times we'll get the phone call and maybe confide with these folks and say, what do you think about this, or how do you feel about this? You're in the market every day. What's your opinion? Sometimes they take our opinion, sometimes not, right? Sometimes we could do a broker's price opinion on what we think we would value the farm at, or do an appraisal. We have a great appraisal team that does all types of not just farmland, but any types of ag appraisals. But at the end of the day, it's their asset, and it's their decision on what they want to do with it. And if they want to sell it to a specific individual down the road for a below market rate, then absolutely, that's what we're here to help with that, or help you achieve that.
Ernie Goss at Creighton University has one of his studies, the Rural Main Street Index. I'm very familiar with it, and I just kind of briefed you on it before we started. But one of the things he always looks at, the one he talks about bankers, 58% of his bankers in his mid-November survey said that lending or that land values, those lenders think that we're going to see a 3% drop off in the value of farmland in 2026. Do you concur?
I would agree with that in the short term. Just from what we've seen in the last 30, 45 days. And we talked about this back in August with our team, and that we've talked about this equilibrium point coming where we've seen a gluttony of buyers for a long time and not as many sellers. And we're starting to reach that point where maybe there's some farms out there that aren't getting sold at auction for what the sellers would like. And so that really tells me that there's a lot less buyers out there, especially for those lower quality or average farms, um, in comparison to what there was even 6 months ago. I think, the lower crop this year, we were all boasting in July what we thought this corn crop was going to be, and it just wasn't there for a lot of reasons. So that plays a role into it too, just the cash on hand, and we can get a lot of short term focus on the wet that we've had, especially in northern Iowa, just how wet it's been. So especially those farms that have drainage issues right now, they're getting discounted heavily. And so unless you have a top tier farm that's pattern tiled, 90 CSR or better, great 80 acres in a great location, the farms are getting discounted for a lot of reasons right now. And so I can see that continuing on into 26. Um, Now, hopefully, we're in that bottom trough right now. Hopefully, we're not continuing to slide, but these things lag, right? So even if we do gain $1 on the corn or something outlandish, it's going to take a little bit for our market to catch up, um, on the land side.
So land is lagging. I'm sorry, land lags always, or just in this scenario?
I would say in this scenario, especially on the downward trend, we don't want to believe that things are negative, right? Nobody wants to. Farmers are eternal optimists,
Mhm.
and so. But I do think just that cash on hand and working capital is going to be a continued struggle this winter and into the spring, for sure.
All right, I'm going to make you squirm. Let's play a what if game. What if we don't get that rally? What if farmers don't have the cash? What if this lasts another 18 to 24 months? What
And
happens?
there's going to be a lot of farms for sale without buyers, because I do think we're working on expectations that are in the past, right? a lot of times when we talk about putting a farm on the market, we're dealing with comparable sales that are 6, 12, sometimes 18 months old when we're talking to our sellers. And so that's the expectation. So as we move down, unless I have to sell, I want this price, right? That's what
Right.
I think it's worth. And who's to argue, but it's hard when it's changing and changing rapidly. So I do think there'd be a lot more farms for sale. Whether they'll get sold, that'll be based on the individual family dynamic or owner dynamic. Um, those folks that don't have to sell right now, they're in a good position because they can hold that price to where they'd like it to be, and they can wait for that buyer. Um,
So who becomes a buyer then in that scenario? If you said that there's could be more land than buyers, is that when the investment class returns?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's when you see these good buys, right? There's a lot more opportunities in that type of a market for somebody that's looking to buy. And so they can wait for those pieces and be very selective on rate of return, where they're at. And in my mind, those farms that are going to be good buys are going to be those farms that maybe they have poor drainage, but they could be fixed. Maybe just around the edges, it looks tough. The waterways aren't being kept up, the terraces, trees, those things that could be relatively quickly improved upon. And then once this market would change, those are the first farms to appreciate. And so that gap will come back for those farms. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of the investors getting in on those B quality farms. Maybe they have some issues, but they could be improved.
I don't know how well you can answer this one, but again, making you squirm. These investors, are
Mhm.
they all from the United States?
In Iowa, they are. Right? We have laws about foreign ownership of land, which I love. Personally, as an Iowa farm boy, I like that. It does keep folks out. I was in Illinois last week, and I'll just share on that auction. We had 4 tracks available, and we had one farmer bidder in the whole auction. Everybody else was an investor. So it does keep a lid on our prices, just from a competition standpoint. But I think we've all agreed, or our legislator has agreed, that that's okay, because we're rooting for the farmer in a lot of ways by doing that. Um,
I'm not 100% sure I followed that, because are you saying that when it's 3 farmers or 4 farmers in the room bidding, the price goes up, but the investors don't necessarily bid each other up like the farmers do? Is that what you meant by keeping a
no,
lid?
no, no. I would
Okay,
say by just a free market perspective, right? The more folks that can compete,
sure.
generally the higher the price. And that was my take in the Illinois farms. And typically they can have a little bit higher prices than us on average. And I think that is some of the reason, is that they don't have those same ownership laws, where they have a lot more investors that come in there. Not necessarily foreign investors, but they're just a lot less stringent on that.
So the ownership, the investor class is still, they'll outbid each other
Sure they
if they
will.
view
Yep.
it as
Yep.
a good investment for them. They want that piece. And a
Sure they
farmer
will.
is always looking for a deal.
Yes, they are.
Just like they
Yep.
look at a tractor and they go, yeah, it's got too many hours on it, I'm going to walk down. It's the old kicking of the tires, like we do with a car. We
Right.
all can relate to that. I mean, but farmers will pay if they feel that if it's the track of land there versus 4 miles away where I got to move equipment a whole lot different.
Right. Right. If it's right next to your base of operation, they're much more willing to extend for that piece than something farther out.
Okay. So
Yeah.
again, let's discuss Illinois. The foreign, if it, the limitations aren't there as much. In other states, there's issues. Um, what are you getting a sense of legislatively in certain states and pressures of changing those laws one way or the other? Do you see, as we come to the new year, new lawmakers have new ideas?
I think I'm not one to get into politics a
I
whole
told
lot,
you I was going to make you
but
squirm, Thomas.
but there's definitely a push for, like you heard on the national level, on the concern about China
Yeah.
specifically, buying Iowa farm ground or any type of land in the US. I know there's other ways that foreign owners um, can own a piece of the production system, like through easements or through um, wind energy, solar energy. I know there's opportunities for them that way, rather than owning the specific acre that it's on. Um, it, it it obviously impacts our tax base. When we have solar or wind development in some counties, you can see, there's better roads, there's better, bridges, those types of things that come with it. But yeah, there's obviously consequences on the backside too if it gets too out of hand. And so I'm glad I'm not in those seats to make those decisions, but it definitely impacts what we're doing on the ground. So
But I've also heard, and it could just be speculation inside our office as we discuss the world, that there is this potential of looking at limiting. There'll be benefits to somebody who's 100 miles or less from where that land that they would buy. So a much more local ownership than someone from outside. Maybe it's not a foreign company, but somebody from Mississippi buying Iowa land or Ohio buying Iowa land. But if there could be some benefits if you are within a circle of that land. Is that something you think could ever happen? Does that make any sense? Or
I'm
am
not
I
sure
now
I
explaining?
follow. Is there a tax incentive for
Yeah,
owning?
that there could be
Okay,
a tax incentive because of putting money on improving the local tax base,
sure.
knowing the ownership, knowing the owner and the renter, or the owner and the buyer better,
Yep.
to prevent people who live in Colorado who still own Iowa farmland.
Yeah, I could argue it both ways. I see the argument. I also see, the benefit of the free market, the open market, and the more folks that can play, the higher prices that we're going to gather at auction from those folks. We've worked with landowners. This is a great story, but one in particular said, "Hey, is there something that I can, donate to? Is there, especially this time around the holidays, folks are giving back and, giving to the local fire department or giving to the local Toys for Tots or something like that." He said, because I'm an absentee landowner. The land base, the local operators paying cash rent, and it's coming to me
Hmm.
that I don't live in that area. I want to give back. I thought that was a great message where he's seeing that, right? He's understanding that. So it is something we're always impacted with, no doubt.
It's a yeah, because that money that's what it is. It's that fire department. It's the whatever charity that might benefit, or
Hmm.
just the overall, the school, however it is. Renting wise, rents going up or down?
A lot of our rents stayed steady from last year to this year, and a lot of those were negotiated pre-harvest. Just with the lease laws that we have in Iowa, it forces that conversation much earlier, right, than we would sometimes like it to be. So a lot of them were negotiated around that September 1st time frame, either side of that, and a lot of them continued at that time, just rolled them for one more year.
Just kind of see what happens on the other side in a
Hmm.
year.
Hmm.
Let's go back to something you said earlier. You said if we put $1 on corn, we put $2 on beans. Again, there's a lag and there's a sale. Do we say we get a rally? Say China does continue to buy. Say this happens. Say that happens. Say there's a crop problem in another country, and we do rally. Is that the biggest driver of what might turn things around from where you're seated?
That's going to help. I think any sort of government facilitation program that would come out. I know there's a lot of talk about it. Any sort of quick relief that could go straight to the farmers, that would be much more impactful, because a lot of that grain is sitting in a bin somewhere, right? And it's hard to pry that out of a guy's hand, especially when it's on the rally. he thinks it's going to go another dollar, you know? So not all that grain gets capitalized when we just move it up one. Um, but yeah, any sort of impact on the profitability of the acre is going to impact prices in a positive way.
Do you get the sense more land is going to go in and out of production, whether there's a program to reserve some things or to let we know that you always have to farmers think they can produce their way out of it, and it's like,
hmm
well, if we would just have less land in production, that's just realistically not going to happen.
I tend to agree with you, especially, and I've noticed it in the last year with our um, CRP situation where with the new administration, whether it was intentional or not, we just saw a larger crackdown on existing CRP, mid-contract management, encroachment, a lot of these production practices that the monitoring of the CRP was way amplified this summer. And so you saw a lot of frustration from the farmers or the folks that are taking care of it. And then on the backside of that, to have the government shut down in that time period when the payments are being made really put a sour taste in folks' mouth. And we're noticing it on those CRP farms for sale. And that's the narrative, is that they don't want anything to do with that CRP unless it's coming out in the next year or two. So that makes me think too that there's going to be less incentive to jump into these programs, especially when the government's shutting down and we're not getting the answers timely. It could be a struggle in the short term.
Just happen to, I mean, I know the land where you're seated, Thomas. I know how it's much marshier and there's more of it around you. So yeah, you
hmm
absolutely have a front row seat to those discussions that happen north and west of Clear Lake there,
hmm
and to the south. So yeah, incredible insight there. Okay, as we get close to the end, um, let's talk to the seller and the buyer right now. Things to watch here in the next 6 months that we
For the
haven't maybe
seller,
talked about.
for the seller, I think we need to take a very, very close look at what's going on in your local neighborhood, your township. How much land has been changing hands? And then what your goals are. Are they short term, long term? If you have to sell in the short term, then let's make sure we're doing it the right way. If that's a live public outcry auction, okay, that's what we would recommend. But we also want to look at different types. Is it a listing? Is it a quiet listing? Is it a sealed bid offering, or maybe an online only auction? And there's pros and cons to each one of those and reasons why we would suggest one over the other. Um, but it's going to be very localized, and there's going to be pressure to drive those prices down, as we talked about.
Hmm. And from the
For the
buyer
buyer,
perspective, yeah,
for the buyer, I would say keep your eyes open and be watching every single one. Don't assume that this farm is going to go for 16,000 because the last one went for 16,000. There's two different auctions we've been to that have no sailed, and all the buyers, that's exactly what they said. Well, I thought this farm was going to bring X, so I wasn't even prepared. And so I would just say be prepared for everyone, because you don't know when the opportunity is going to be there. And when it does present itself, you want to be ready. So,
and we still could have something that pops off ridiculously high, right? I mean, that
we
potential's
will.
still there.
Absolutely, we will. Yes. Yes. Like I said, those flat black square 80-acre pieces that are pattern tiled 90 CSR, they're going to sell well, as good as they've sold the last 2 years.
Especially in an area where maybe there's some animals as well.
100%. Yeah. We didn't talk much about that, but yeah, there's a lot of, local impact with cattle and things of that nature in different areas.
Yeah, because I was talking to someone close to the land behind me here who sold, and that was a family situation and a generational change of passing, and they were super happy with the price that they received as the sellers.
Sure.
And it was somebody who was in the area that bought. And I don't know if that was a public. I think it was a private listing because they couldn't tell me
hmm
the seller for quite a while.
Sure.
And then I said, well, locally the county this, the locally the county that. You're very close to the border there. And then I have the conversations from Northwest Iowa still. about everybody saying, yeah, that's still going to go high. That's still going to go high. That
Hmm.
hasn't changed, I'm guessing, by your smile.
No, not up there. It's a great place to be. A lot of demand, a lot of strong cash buyers, and a lot of livestock too.
And again, I didn't even get into the regional side of things. So if we could, are there areas that's so still a strong area? Are there
It
other
is.
areas that are hot?
Yep. Yep. I would say too, if you move across the top of the top tier counties, that Mitchell County right now, there's a lot of cattle up in there, and that's very, very strong as well. Southwest Iowa, we're seeing some pasture farms that are bringing really, really good money too. There's just a lot more cattle down there. Um, and yeah, there's a pocket there, kind of state center area, kind of in central Iowa that also has quite a few cattle.
And
Those
that's
those would be my few.
so the cattle area, something to do with cattle adjacent, whether
Yes.
it's not necessarily manure, but maybe grazing, have become popular.
And the diversification, those folks that have, aren't just cash grain farming, they've been, on the receiving end of some pretty nice profits here of late. Whether that's going to continue or not, um, I grew up liking cattle, so it's in my blood. And what happens is you just buy more, right? You want
You can't
so
quit it.
so. Um, anyway, there's some areas around there that need the manure or need the land for expansion, and we're still seeing strong prices there too.
See, Thomas, you were worried we were going to talk about the same thing. See, we diverged a little bit.
Yes, we do every time. That's all
Well,
right.
I always appreciate your time. Thomas Shutter from Farmers National Company. Good to see you. Thank you so much. I know I appreciate you wedging me in because I know it's a very, very busy time of year.
Thank you, Paul, and likewise.
All right.
Thank you.
That has been this installment of the MTOM podcast. I'm Paul Yeager. New episodes come out each and every Tuesday. If you have any feedback for me, send me an email, market to market at iowapbs.org. We'll see you next time.